So, with patch 2.1 being out of the door, it's time to take a look at the future, 2.1 and 2.2 and beyond. There's a lot of really cool stuff on the horizon. However, I wanted to get you guys up to speed on what has been changed since the Distant Stars launch, which has been very fruitful, I would say. There's a lot of really positive things going around. The L cluster itself is a little bit barren at the moment, but it looks like the developers, once they're back from vacation, will be working on additional things to put in there. So let's take a look at our patch notes for 2.1 and 2.1.1 and 2.1.2 and see what the changes are so far. This is going to be a very glossary thing. It's a lot of quality of life stuff. So let's dive right into it and see what we can find. So 2.1.1, the patch is live right now, and you are most likely playing with it as it is at the moment. So we're going to be trying to illustrate as much as we can here with additional footage from the game and see where this will take us. Now, first of all, free features, the best part of any patch. Hyperlane density can now be set to full. Basically, every single star that is bordering another star will be able to connect to that star through hyperlanes, effectively generating a giant web, and no longer will stuff be connected through the... what's the word I'm looking for here? The constellation system, of course. You can also choose to start in a trinary or binary system whilst creating your empire. This by itself can be very good. Trinary systems have a lot of resources in them, binary systems as well, but of course you can always choose to go for one of the preset systems like Deneb or Earth or any of the random system setups, but having the ability to go for a trinary or binary system is rather nice. Experimental ETA feature. This is now rolled out completely in the game, and basically it will show when your fleets will arrive at their destination. Previously, it wasn't very clear how long a fleet will take to get from A to B. However, now that this feature is in the game, it's a lot easier to see which fleets will take priority in order to be assigned fast response duty. So being able to see how fast a fleet is going to get at their destination is rather important. Hopefully that we're going to be seeing some expansionary stuff with this when it comes to the hyperspace registrar. It's something we discussed in the video regarding the trade empire, something that I want to be seeing in the near future as well. So it's also possible to achieve partial victory in a subjugation and liberation wars with occupied systems splitting off as a new subject. For those of you who have been watching the One Planet Challenge, this is something you've already seen. Basically what it means is if you're in a subjugation and or liberation war, if you manage to conquer a certain amount of systems, however, you are forced to status quo out of the war, either through white peace and or normal status quo, then you will get a partial victory, and all the planets and systems that you have under your control during the war will split off from the enemy empire and will become a vassal of your specifications. If you have gone for a vassal approach or a tributary approach, those will either be selected as the empire that it will turn into. Very useful in order to carve up enemy empires and trying to get the maximum amount of resources available. Grayscale versions of strategic resources icons have been added to the game. Basically, now in the game, you will find strategic resources as you survey the system so that you know which systems are going to be important. What is important here is that obviously you will not have some of the technology there. So, for instance, the very late game stuff like dark matter, etc., you won't be able to get those resources early on because you don't have the tech. However, it will show up on the map. It will be grayscaled out until you have access to those in order to, well, obviously to consume them. It can be very annoying if you have Zero and you're Materialist, because then the chance of getting Psionic is a pretty big problem. So get ready to play Materialist and having Zero in your empire, and you won't be able to use it. There's some balanced stuff. The power usage of torpedoes have gone up. It doesn't really impact things all that much. It does mean that the neutron torpedoes on a battleship do require a slightly lower amount of shields on one unless you have some of the more advanced power setups, something from the Fallen Empires or the Enigmatic Fortress if you have Leviathans. So getting a Fallen Empire power supply is actually quite good early on, because then you can spec out your torpedo battleships quite easily. Devastator torpedoes on corvettes still work perfectly fine in combination with some of the more interesting weapon systems like disruptors that bypass shields and armor completely and makes things very, very useful. Reduce the frequency of gaining L-gates insighted from unrelated anomalies by 70%. This means that you will find the entrances, well, not the entrances, but the access to the L-gates or the L sector a lot later in the game. So basically, this is a balancing item. Previously, when Distant Stars came out, there were a lot of reports of people breaking open the L cluster way too early and getting stomped by the Great Tempest, which was obviously not a very fun experience, but a good learning experience for everybody involved. Don't open the L gates before you're ready. If you don't have 50,000 fleet power and sitting on that gate ready to bounce in, you're gonna have a bad time. All technology must now be researched after gathering all L gate insights. It's just another gate into getting access to the L cluster. Basically, once you've got all your L gate insights, you need to research a tech, and then you will have access to the system in order to open it up. So get the insights, get the technology, then do the project, then open the gates. My apologies. The HP of missiles have been reduced across the board, making point defense a lot more useful in the game. Now, obviously, this only applies to enemies that use missiles. However, it does mean that missiles are not as good as they used to be. This is kind of funny coming from me, considering missiles used to be utter garbage until the retargeting system came in, which made them the primary choice of almost everybody. And now they have been nerfed a little bit, and now there's point defense that is a little bit stronger. Still, missiles are one of the best starting weapons in the game, and you should still use them, especially if the enemy does not have any point defense systems. Prosperity faction will now be happier if your war policy is set to defensive wars only. I have a lot of problems with the faction system. I don't think it's very straightforward, and it requires more tooltips when it comes to, hey, which systems should you enable or disable to make your faction happier, especially if there's 10-year cooldowns on some of your policies. This is interesting, but it's not really the most impactful thing at all. And prosperity is, of course, when you have a wealthy empire, so egalitarian, etc. Imperialist faction is now okay with ideological wars and will only be angry if policy is set to defensive wars only. It makes perfect sense. Liberation wars and aggressive wars, totally a thing. Imperialists, they want you to expand, so that's fine. And pressing your ideology on top of a other empire, perfectly cool with them as well. Reduce the chance of the Marauder Great Khan dying from non-combat issues. So the Great Khan can die of various things that you literally have no impact on. He can be killed by a concubine. He can succumb to disease. He can be assassinated internally, etc., etc., etc. Basically, what happens now is, once the mini crisis of the Khan starts, there is a bigger chance of them expanding into a much larger empire earlier on, and not falling apart due to the Great Khan dying. So that's now here, and 2.1.2 has a couple more things regarding the Khan. We'll get to that shortly. Rogue Servitors can now allow organics to colonize planets. Previously, Rogue Servitors could not have organics on their colony ships, mainly because, well, they need to be pampered. They need to sit in their biodomes. They need to be happy, and they are not allowed to do anything. And this kind of impacted Rogue Servitors significantly because, well, let's put it this way: if they do not have any organics to pamper, they become really unhappy and unproductive. And now this is a thing. So Rogue Servitors will be able to send their bionics out there and then build themselves up and happily pamper them on other planets. So good times for everybody. Increased AI weight for naval cap and command limit techs. Interesting. So basically what this means is that the AI will have a more difficult time getting naval cap and command limit technology. Basically, the AI has a couple of modifiers that makes the game a little bit more interesting. The AI is not perfect, therefore it gets a bonus to certain things, and a limits, or at least a increased ability of getting naval cap and command limit technology is one of them, and especially considering the command limit system is now in place, it means that they would be able to get fleets that were a lot larger than yours. So that's something you want to be keep an eye on right there. Increase the base weight of terraforming techs, which means that they are now more expensive to research. The base weight basically means it's either costs 5,000 or 6,000 or hell 2,000 tech points in order to get them, depending, of course, how many additional systems you have, which adds another modifier on planetary weight and system weight as well. So reduce materialist opinion towards machine empires. Materialists really used to like robot empires. No longer, though, they are not nearly as happy to work with them. There's a new icon for the L cluster, which is rather nice. The AI will wait sometimes before changing AI priority. There's a bunch of performance stuff. There's always performance stuff in the game. I know that the game itself can have some serious issues on performance due to the way the CPU cycles work on the CloudSpitz engine. I've been tempted, and I've talked about this in the past as well, to talk a little bit and take the time to do a video about CPUs and what sort of CPUs have impact on the late game and how performance works. Just to illustrate, I have, what kind of system do I have here? Let's take a look. Device manager is the one I'm looking for? No, that's not the one. So the CPU I have on this machine is a i7-4790K, which is a previous generation i7, so that's something you want to keep in mind. i7s, of course, are a little bit better optimized, but the higher clock speed you have on your CPU, the better the game will run. And this has more to do with the way the engine is coded. Modding, there's a bunch of scripts being added, which is rather cool. Some performance, like global is saved events targets, so basically any sort of custom crises are applied to that. Event designs that are on the fleet manager is now in there, etc. And a whole slew of bug fixes. So that is something that you want to, be taking a look at. Fix L gates that were open in 2.1.1 being unusable in 2.1.1. There were some transition stuff issues here. Bunkerbot is now actually generating an L gate insight. Basically, there was it's an event where a CPU is found inside of a bunker, and it should generate an L gate insight. I also encountered the Anomaly, but I didn't get an L gate insight from it, which is a little bit annoying. So that has now been fixed. Improved janky to janky def animation, giving the rise to the desire of new 1930s dance craze. There's a lot of small stuff in here. Brain Slug's traits are now in there. We'll do a separate video about the new traits in the Distant Star setup, such as the super adaptive empire, the ratlings, and of course the brain slugs. So that's kind of important there. But overall, the bug fixes for us is not really important. It's more the features and performance stuff that is important for us. Let's quickly dive in the 2.1.2 stuff to see what we can find there. So 2.1.2, the beta patch that's currently out. You can opt into it through your game settings on your Steam, if you're actually using Steam, that is. I think that's the only place that you can really opt into it at the moment. However, there's a bunch of things that are being added in 2.1.2, and this is currently an opt-in patch as of making this video, so it's not final yet. So a bunch of things are coming in. 3 features. Map modes are now able to show claims. So diplomatic map mode will now be able to show which claims an empire has on which other empire. And this basically allows you to be a little bit more strategic with your wars, etc. So you know exactly who claims what, where, and how. And this is kind of it's kind of important if your neighbor has somehow put a claim on you and you don't know where those claims are, so you can go into diplomatic map mode and actually see these claims. They added the Kuiper Belt to the Sol system. Pluto is in there now as well. The dwarf planet, I know that a lot of you are rubbed the wrong way with that particular one, but yeah, the Kuiper Belt is now here. Joy. Added new event pictures, great, that's from the art department, and Control F9 now also hides system lines and navigation arrows. This may not be very interesting for you, but for me this is great because I do quite a lot of stuff with Tweaker GUI and removing system lines and navigation arrows, etc., just for those cinematics that I run on the joypad or the game controller, which is kind of a big deal. It's now possible to rename the current selected faction in faction view by clicking its name, so you can rename all those factions to all sorts of hilarious things that are no longer relevant. So, for instance, if there's a faction that you really don't like, hey, you can call them Mr. Poopy Butthole. Not that Mr. Poopy Butthole is an annoying thing. Mr. Poopy Butthole was a hero, and he got shot, and it was a terrible thing. Spoilers for Rick and Morty. Balance. Re-enabled pre-sentient discovery anomalies for the AI. Apparently, there were some pre-sapient discoveries that the AI did not have access to in 2.1, which is was kind of annoying. So that's the thing. They've been put back in. Existing Horde fleets are now removed upon the Great Khan's death and replaced by a fixed number of replacements. Once again, for those of you who've been watching the One Planet Challenge videos that I've been putting out, the Great Khan in my particular game has a giant, or at least the the post-Empire from the Great Khan has a giant stack of fleets. Those are now removed and replaced with a certain number of replacements, so you don't have gigantic Great Khan doom stacks throughout the entire game until the Crisis fleets show up or the Awakened Empire show up and basically kick them all the way back to the Stone Age. AI empires are now more likely to find L cluster insights after 100 years have passed. If you haven't opened up the L gates after 100 years, the AI will most likely find more insights, and there's a good chance that they will try to crack open the gates. So yeah, AI empires can now crack open the gates, and that would cause problems for you. Because, well, let's put it this way, all the gates are on a timer. The first gate that gets opened has immediate access into the L cluster, and all the other ones either are invaded by dragons or by the Tempest, or there's nothing and they just claim the entire place for themselves. And, of course, egress is one of the best systems in the games when it comes to strategic locations, let's put it that way. Increased levels of precursor anomalies across the board. You will finally be able to get those precursor anomalies finished. You can finally get those Cybrex ring worlds, etc. So that's kind of a big deal right there. Balanced anomaly levels, according to QA and player feedback. So some of the anomalies levels were a little bit too difficult or a little bit too easy, and they've been changed across the board. So if you find an anomaly that's level 5 now, it's because, well, it's basically because of what the community has been feeding QA. Marauder empires are less likely to spawn close to an empire starting system. That's great, so you won't be able to be completely boned by them. Rogue servitors and assimilators can now once again pick the World Shaper perk. Now that's a pretty big deal. The World Shaper perk is an Ascension perk that allows you to generate Gaia planets, but also machine worlds. And Rogue servitors and assimilators should be able to build machine worlds. So this is kind of a big deal. Reduced frequency of terraforming candidates by about 50%. So a lot of terraforming candidates, which you can always find through the colonizer or the colonization planner, will no longer show up as much, so by about 50%. Only ships that are docked in a starbase will upkeep reduction. With upkeep reduction will now show as having a green orbit in the outliner. Other ships in orbit along something else will not get a upkeep reduction, and they will show up as yellow. Cool. All right, let's take a look here. What other things we got here? UI, only ships that are docked in a starbase. We already talked about this. Modding, there's a bunch of new modding stuff added, such as overrides should AI use. I don't know what that would do. Added on added pop on action when a pop is added to a planet, so that's events where pops are getting added. We'll go into that into a future video. A bunch of stuff where fixed an issue acquiring L-Gate and L-Gate activation tech out of order. All right, okay, so then basically the entire L-Gate system will be completely useless because now we need to get a tech, and then you need to get a special project, and then you crack open the gates. So names for country designs are no longer duplicated. Some localization is being updated. Marauder raiding fleets will now always be deleted a year after they start to withdraw. A rare situation where they get stuck. I actually managed to do that once. Basically what I did was I had a setup where I blew up a planet as the Marauders were raiding it, and they were infinitely stuck around the planet because they wanted to steal pops, and the planet was no longer there, so they got stuck there. So that's the thing. Fixed an event trigger, preventing rudimentary robot chain from continuing once you colonize their planet. Colossus tech being able to be reversible. Yeah, that's a good one. Considering Colossus Tech does cost an Ascension perk, this is a pretty big deal right here. Impossible organism, Niflak, should no longer be placed on a holy world. That's definitely a good idea. Cloud lightning was hidden, so were the flagella as well, but they're now back, so that's good. The pacifist defensive war only trigger properly. Upgrading designs twice. And template manager has been fixed. Outclass the strategic resources will no longer appear on planets with ring worlds or terraform worlds. That's probably a good idea. Lingabo bots can no longer be used on colonized planets. Yeah, this is looking pretty good. But where are we going from here is the real question. What are we going to do with 2.1.2? Well, what we know right now is that the development team is on vacation. They will be back in early August. The thing is that they are probably working right now on some of the new stuff that's coming up in 1.2. We're going to be talking about that a little bit more next time because planet-wide cities are coming. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the patch notes for 2.1.2. A very light update, and this is all mostly quality of life stuff as well as 2.1.1. And I hope that you enjoyed this. It's not the richest content out there, but it's still quite useful to know that new systems have been put into the game. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take good care of yourselves, and as always, each other.